Someone should be here filming this, I think. Capturing all these moments that lead up to these live broadcasts. They make it look so easy. We try and make it look so easy. And we are here to present tonight the Harris-Trump thriller in non-Manila 1.0. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Donald Trump will square off with Kamala Harris. I really am, as we get kicked off tonight, Mike Church here with you live on the Crusade Radio Network. I'll be joined by L-armed Catholic Richard Barrett, Mahgdalen Rose, and Mike Parrott will also join us during the course of the evening. And, of course, we'll have the live coverage live from the center. You ought to see this setup here if you haven't seen it. They basically took the entire floor of the arena that I guess the Philadelphia Flyers and the 76ers, or whatever they call them these days, plays in Philadelphia. And they put the debate stage at one end of the floor, like where the north end goal or goalie would be. And then the whole rest, and there's a little green room area, then the whole rest of the floor of the stadium there is just covered with, it almost looks like the UN. You know, have you ever seen when they're at the UN and, everyone has their little headphones on because they're getting translated versions of whoever it is that's talking, but each individual has a desk, whatever country has this desk and this country has that desk, and they have a little placard there and it says, this is from Ghana or wherever. That's kind of what the floor looks like there. So hundreds upon hundreds of reporters from around the world are there to record this and then to send stories back to their respective news agencies as we are sending our coverage back to you out there on the Crusade Radio Network. Here live tonight at crusadechannel.com, on the Twitter, on x.com. You can follow us at the KingDude, at Veritas Radio Net. On YouTube, you can download our apps for free in the Google Play and iTunes stores. Look for the Crusade Radio Network, and, of course, on Rumble and on our YouTube. Of course, we are funded and financed by your donations. No donations, no shows. So right there in the YouTube window, there is a little dollar button at the bottom of the chat window, and the Crusader Stadium chat room, welcoming all our founders, past members, who actually do keep us in business and on the air here in our Crusader Stadium chat room at crusadechannel.com/chat. We're joined now, I'll start tonight with L-armed Catholic Richard Barrett. And Mr. Barrett and I will talk a little bit about what we expect to happen tonight. One of the things that was just, we kind of just learned it this afternoon, was that the Harris campaign had requested literally a Vern Troyer podium. Now, if you're wondering who Vern Troyer is, oh, come here, do you need a hug? Number one, do you need a hug? Little mini-me from the Austin Powers movies. She actually requested a podium that was Kamala-sized, because he's 6'3" and she's 5'4". So she will be standing behind a podium that is scaled down to fit her, and Trump will be, I guess, the Jolly Trump giant, because he's 6'3". Richard, Mr. Barrett will join up with Mr. Barrett and get his commentary on this, live from his little studio in Salado, Texas there. Richard, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Mr. Church. Good evening to everybody. I hope everybody's doing well out there this evening. Happy to be here as always.
And we're happy to have you. Did you hear about the podium switch?
I did. And at this point, it's whatever the Harris campaign can get as far as concessions, because they wanted all kinds of concessions on the way up to this. Everything from unmuted mics to a notepad to a live audience. Essentially, they were handcuffed by Biden, and these are the rules for the Biden debate from June. And they agreed to all these debates with muted mics and no crowd and both standing. And so it really takes away from any, not advantage, but anything that makes her comfortable. Because in 2020, she did the sit down with Pence, and that was allowing her to negate that height difference, because psychologically people tend to always look at taller people, and believe me, I know this, as those who are, for lack of a better term, better leaders. Or from the John Adams HBO special, when Franklin and Adams were talking, and Washington is picked, Franklin has the famous line, he's the tallest man in the room, he was bound to lead something. So psychologically, we're programmed to look at tall people as leaders, however you want to say it. So this whole thing just feeds into the fact that Kamala Harris has never been ready for this job. She wasn't ready for it in 2020. That's why she got ran out of the debates. And she only did well in the 2020 debate with Pence, supposedly because of the viral moment of the I'm speaking, which she will not have tonight without an audience to react to, and without the ability for the mics to be. She can't say I'm speaking because Trump won't be speaking at this point, so that there won't be any viral moment to try and save her campaign from that. And Harris is just filled with insecurities, because I don't think she's ever really, like, Hillary Clinton wanted to be president.
Oh,
she
yes.
did everything she could to be president. Trump, he had years and years and years of public speaking, so it didn't phase either one of them that much. Kamala Harris kind of wanted to be the attorney general. She kind of wanted to be a senator, and she kind of wanted to be the vice president. She's kind of just fallen upward, as you will. And now this is the consequences of this, where she's now going to be one-on-one with somebody who has already debated a woman. He's the only person in the Republican Party that's debated a female presidential candidate. Anybody else would have been scared of that, or maybe tiptoed around it.
He debated three.
Well, I mean,
Carly
he's done it
Fiorina.
before.
Right.
I mean,
Carly,
he's done it before.
in 2016, Carly Fiorina. In 2024, Nikki Haley. And then, of course, 2016, Hillary Clinton. So he's debated three women.
Well, I mean, like, yes, that is very correct. But I mean, like, one-on-one on a presidential stage.
Right.
But that is also correct. He's got enough of that where he's not afraid of that advantage that she would have against any other male who's going to tiptoe around the fact that she's a woman. So all of these things just feed into the fact that she's not built for this moment, and not many people are. You have to be a super narcissist to want to run for president, and she just doesn't have it. So all of these things, it's just another blow for her to not be able to have that. And I think, just like everything else, the entire Harris campaign has been slapped together because of the fact that it was not planned. That's what I was talking about, why they were going to go with Joe Biden, even though I was wrong. I said they're going to go with Joe because you can't throw together a presidential campaign.
Oh, I agreed with you.
Yeah, I know. Yes, you did, and you're one of the few, so I appreciate that. You can't slap together a presidential campaign in 20 minutes, and you're seeing this as they go. Tim Awalt's terrible pick for VP. The convention, not really great, no bump from it. Her messaging, terrible. She's finally put out her proposals. Guess what? They're just Joe Biden's or Trump's, depending on what day it is. And so I think the podium, which they feel is like, oh, we'll make her look taller. It's going to make exactly what you said, Mike. It's just going to make her look like a child at the kids' table
At Thanksgiving.
as opposed to the adult table. Because
Right.
Hillary Clinton, say whatever you will, she went with the full podium. She didn't shy away from it. So
You got to remember, too, in 2016, as you said, Hillary not only had debated before, but she went all the way to June, the middle of June, almost the end of June in 2008 against Obama. And there was a famous interview with Katie Couric where Hillary goes, well, Katie Couric says, well, what if it's not you? And Hillary goes, well, Katie, it will be me. And so you're right. For 8 years, she stewed as that Russian frickin' Obama. And make no mistake about this, the Obamas hate the Clintons and the Clintons hate the Obamas. These people don't love anything other than money and dead children. So make no mistake, they make a lot of money and a lot of abortions or transitions or starvation, however they get their jollies with the dead kids. But Hillary wanted that office. And she was willing to do whatever had to be done and to say whatever had to be done and to go stand toe-to-toe with Donald Trump. No one wants to go toe-to-toe with Trump. You don't. You remember when Carly Fiorina was still in the race in 2016. I'll never forget this. This was was one of those debates. It was in, I want to say January. It was right before the New Hampshire primary, and it hadn't been decided yet. And people are going like, Carly Fiorina, she's a businesswoman. She's better than Trump. She's going to do this and she's going to do that. And they had that debate, and it came Trump's term, and he just looked at her and goes, Carly, you're not the CEO. You've ruined it. Dan Packard were alive today, he'd fire you so fast. Get out of here, Carly. You ruined Hewlett Packard. The stock is in the tank because of you. You're not a leader. And then Trump just goes down the list of all the things that Carly Fiorina had done, and she had no comeback other than, well, you claimed bankruptcy. He goes, yeah, so that's all you got there. Yeah, and then I built $1 trillion business after that bankruptcy. Carly, what did you do? The world is going to see, Richard, and I think that you and I have been talking about this since 2016, and few people bring this point up, but maybe after this, it'll finally sink in. You're not dealing with a politician, Donald John Trump. He just isn't. He is not Jerry Nadler. He's not Pelosi. He's not Mitch McConnell. He's not any of these people. He didn't swim in these circles. Yeah, he actually had to, fight his way. Look, they're showing the podium now. Maggie, cut to that screen if you would, real quick. It literally is a mini me podium. Okay, Kamala, you're over here. You have the little knife and the little fork and the little spoon. That's yours. Donald, you're over here.
Look goofy. That's the problem. She's gonna look goofy no matter what.
It looks silly. And you know what, Richard? This is another. Well, let me finish my first thought. We have been talking about this. When you're dealing with Trump, you're dealing with someone that is just a leader. He's an alpha male. Like Megyn Kelly famously said, and now Megyn Kelly's a Trump convert because she finally stopped looking at him as Orange Man bad and a sexual predator and finally went, okay, maybe there is something to this guy. And what did she say about 2 years ago? She said, no, DeSantis, don't do it. Trump walks into the room and all the oxygen is sucked out of it. He just, every living thing that is in that room is focused on him. That's just the way it is. And that's just who he is. Kamala Harris is walking into this. To say that she's an underdog is an insult to underdogs. They have been in the last couple of days lowering this bar. They keep lowering it. Now, basically, all she has to do is show up and not fall asleep or not look at her watch like George Bush famously did in 1992, or not give him a super gaffe, or don't try to cut him off when your mic is cut off. Don't make any of your silly, goofy faces like, I'm talking, okay? Woman, hear me roareth. Talking. White guy, shut up. Me too. Me, I'm talking, shut up. There won't be any of that tonight, and you're right. That was the only card they had. I think they rolled the dice thinking that ABC will cave. When they agreed 10 to 20 days ago, whenever it was, they rolled the dice going like, we got people at ABC. They're going to cave. They're going to give us the mics. They're going to give you the mic, and they didn't do it. To their credit, now, I'm sure that they're going to send this moderator guy, I don't know a lot about, but he doesn't seem to be a good guy. He seems to be one of them usual suspects there. I would fully expect that the advantage that she didn't get, that the advantage that she did that she didn't get was the only advantage that she's going to have. She doesn't have any record to run on. The press has tried to her buddies in the media have tried to keep the stories of the destruction of the Biden regime out of the newspapers and out of online media. And they just can't do it. Like Frank Wright said on the Mike Church show here today when I interviewed Frank, he goes, Mike, I don't think that the people that are running the cabal actually ever imagined that we hoi polloi peasants were actually that Elon was going to come along and that we would actually be successful with peer-to-peer communication and be able to basically out-communicate them. Because if you're on X, We control the narrative. If you're on X.com, I mean, would you agree with that, Richard? That the people on the conservative side, the libertarian side, the more liberty-leaning side, the freedom of speech side, I don't agree with more less than half of it probably, but would you agree that it's finally a place that is on the map, if you will, and it has the potential that all the networks have, and the satanic leftards don't own it. It is a space for actual speech, and I think that our form of the truth, actually, and the narrative is what carries the day on X.
All you have to do, Mike, is look at whether it's true or not. You just have to look at the cat story. You have to look at the migrant story. Think about 2020. If Elon doesn't own X, nobody knows about the 20,000 Haitian migrants in Ohio. Even if they come, all these people who are bankrolling all of these organizations trying to tell you guns are bad, okay, and anybody who owns a gun, it's going to be the Wild West if you do open carry. And every state that has legalized constitutional carry, open carry, whatever you want to call it, they try to say in the lead up to it, oh, well, if everybody's armed, everybody's going to shoot each other. It's going to be wild in the streets. And if there's an incident in a Walmart parking lot over a shopping cart, they're going to shoot each other. And the fact is, crime actually goes down. It's gone down in Texas. It's gone down in Ohio. It's gone down in Florida. Everywhere that they open up the ability for citizens to exercise their God-given, and in 44 out of 50 states, constitutionally protected right to keep and bear arms, crime goes down. And it's very interesting that it's finally getting out, and it needs to get out because it's true.
We are live here on the Crusade Radio Network. Mike Church here with Richard Barrett. Richard, talk for a second here. We had a problem with a piece of equipment, and I need to try to get us back on the air.
Toss me the topic.
You got it. Here you go. Talk about the debate.
Perfect. So, actually, I do have some things to talk. I do have some things stored up about this. So this debate, the only debate that has been agreed to, because Kamala came out after being anointed by the Democratic Party. Interestingly enough, the Bidens were pushed out. The Bidens nominated Kamala, even though Obama wanted to have an open convention. The reason why Trump should say at the beginning of anything, doesn't even matter if she talked to him or not, Madam Vice President, because it will reinforce the fact that she's talking about on day one, I'm going to lower grocery prices. On day one, you're going to get a house. Madam Vice President, why don't you do it now? That's really the line of attack Trump needs to use. Use the name that has been bestowed upon her, Madam Vice President, reinforce it time after time after time. It's going to set her off because her entire strategy is going to try and knock Trump off of his base on debating Kamala. He's brought in Matt Gaetz as far as the idea where how to navigate and how to get around the felon conviction. So he's got all of those things in his corner, and he can't be knocked off by the entire he's a felon and he's stolen the election, blah, blah, blah. Madam Vice President, go back at her. I'm going to build a border wall. Madam Vice President, why don't you don't. The guy's witty enough to get off his axis. We all remember the famous Russia wants its Cold War policy back kind of stuff.
Right.
We think it's stupid, but it's enough to get, it's a slip, it's a jab to kind of get back on there. Kamala has no ability to counterpunch if you just say, Madam Vice President, why haven't you, stopped crime? If you're a prosecutor, why has crime gone up? Or what? Blah, blah. Just keep hammering her and make her get off of her axis of her talking points. Because all you need is one or two moments where she pulls a Rick Perry and she goes, oops, or she pulls a little Marco Rubio and just says the same thing over and over and over again. All you have to do as Trump is expose the fact that she's not ready for this. She's not prepared for this. This boss woman, this boss babe mentality that they're trying to make and build Kamala up as is complete and total media construct. And the fact of the matter is, she doesn't even have her emotional support white guy, Tim Walz, with her at the debate.
Her emotional support dog.
In an interview, he's not there unless
Right.
he's going to be sitting in the crowd with sitting in the back with a sign like, oh, you can do it. He's not next to her. So she's completely alone. She's uncomfortable now because she's standing. She doesn't have a notepad. She doesn't have any of this other stuff. I think really we should have a timer to see how quickly before she does fall apart, Mike. Because I think there's going to be a moment where she just cracks, and the pressure is just too much for her.
Did you see how she cracked in 2020 against Tulsi Gabbard? CNN did not do her any favors in that debate. They kept going off of Tulsi and split screening Kamala with Tulsi Gabbard. And when Tulsi was going like, "You're a terrible prosecutor and you're a terrible human being," let me tell you about her record, okay? Let me tell you what this woman did to people that were locked up for simple, should be misdemeanor offenses that are misdemeanors now in California. She's still treating them like felons. She goes to the parole board meetings and tells them, "Don't let these people out." You know why? Because she wants them to work on chain gang details, cleaning up California's highways because the state is broke and can't afford the workers that they usually would have to mow the grass on the interstates and what have you. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard just absolutely devastated her to the point where, maybe 5 days later, Kamala was like, golden parachute, Geronimo! She's out of the plane. And on her 15,000-foot dive. Here, Richard gave you his expectation. We'll get to Magdalene Rose here in a second and get hers. But let me just give you mine. Here's what I see. I see finally we're going to launch. We're finally going to reach a moment where it is going to be undeniable to Mr. and Mrs. Middle America that they are faced with a choice. A serious choice here. You can choose the AI Manchurian manufactured, should be Kelly LeBrock from the movie Weird Science, but instead an ugly woman in a pantsuit came out, completely and totally manufactured out of whole cloth. Basically, an artificial intelligence creation of the state, of the deep state. If you look at every liberal's fantasy of what their candidate outside of Hillary looks like as a woman, it's Kamala Harris. If you look at every person in the United States, or most people that are sane in the U.S., and what they think of when they think of president, it's not Kamala Harris. It's not even an image of Kamala Harris. It probably wasn't Hillary, which is probably why Hillary lost. And it probably looks something like Trump. You know why? Trump looks something like George Washington. And I'm not saying that Trump is George Washington, but in stature and in command and running things and actually being successful, yeah, Trump is about as close as we're going to get to Washington. The American people are now going to see that they have been had, that their choice was going to be between a decrepit I'm sorry, I was getting feedback in my eyes.
Try again. It's your phone, Siri.
That was Siri jumping in. Take this and throw it in the other room, please. Between a decrepit, aged old man who was suffering serious mental decline, and the entirety of the deep state was in denial. 3 days before, Kamala Harris, no, Joe's perfectly good. Oh, you've never seen someone walk into a meeting until you've seen Joe walk into one. And he just walked into one the other day, brothers and sisters. I'm telling you, he was in command of that room. He was in command of the meeting. They lie. So the American part, the average American person, a Sherson out there, has a choice to make. And I don't think the choice is that difficult. I think about 43% of people are going to stick with, well, I'm a Democrat and I got to do this and I got to vote for reproductive rights and all that. Yeah, sweetheart, you go right on ahead and do that. Now let the real men get to work to fix this country. Let the real men get to work to actually get about the business of repairing what you set into motion or helped set into motion 4 years ago by putting her one bullet away from the presidency. Now, don't give her the damn presidency. And I think most people will see tonight that in this field and at this juncture in American history, the guy that we have at our disposal who's best suited for this job, Richard Barrett, is Donald John Trump. You can, I got to hold my nose. Man, do whatever you got to do. I agree with my friend George Webb, the investigative journalist. The deep state needs a defeat. Trump is the defeat. I don't know how far the defeat goes, But I'm happy that he picked Robert, that RFK Jr. has joined him, because there will be more defeat than there would have been before. And that's really the choice tonight. And I think that will be made clear in this so-called debate this evening. I don't think the serious people take what is about to happen on this stage seriously, other than this is round 2, Richard Barrett. If this is a single elimination, not a round robin, then this is elimination round. One person goes home tonight, one person stays. You know who's going home? Kamala Harris. Mahgdalen Rose, our digital affairs, yes, our political affairs and campaign affairs correspondent. Sorry we had a little technical difficulty there. It's a Crusade Radio Network. It wouldn't be a live broadcast if we didn't. We cleared the hurdle and we're here. What say you?
I think that Donald Trump tonight looks at this debate as the Kamala Harris, as the Hillary Clinton 2.0. Because he's going in and he knows what works against these deeply unlikable female candidates who nobody's really voted for. Technically, Hillary Clinton was voted for in 2016 to become the nominee, but we all know it was a coronation and they sort of got rid of Bernie Sanders in the dead of night and buried him on a beach somewhere. So I think that in general, he's going to look at her and treat her like that. But I agree with Barrett. The more respectful he can be while continuously slamming her on every policy initiative, the better. Because he doesn't lose anybody by saying Madam Vice President. He looks like the superstar. It's his to win. And it's really, to me, it's really not a situation where she even gains anything by winning. Because people already hate Donald Trump. The question is, can Donald Trump make people look at him and go, all right, I'll take a shot at it?
Well, I think there are many people that already took 2 shots with him. There were people that took a shot with him in 2016. There were people that took a shot with him in 2020. Obviously, now, and this is a rarity. This is a rarity, folks. You don't realize how rare this is, that you get to vote for the same candidate for the presidency 3 times. This has only happened, let's see here, 3 times. This will be the 3rd time to my knowledge. Okay, outside of Franklin Delano Obama Roosevelt, we'll throw him out because he was a one-off. You would have gotten a chance to vote for William Jennings Bryan 3 times. He lost all 3 times. You would have gotten a chance to vote for Grover Cleveland 3 times. Cleveland was elected in 1892, lost 1890, lost 1894, won in 1898. I think I have those years right. So 3 times for Grover Cleveland, and then Trump. Now, let's see here. Would Nixon be? I see Nixon lost in 61, and then Nixon. So it's a rarity that you get to vote for someone for 3 times as president, and that opportunity will come to many Americans this November the 5th.
I think it definitely will, and like we talked about this morning, Kamala Harris has been desperately trying to get an edge, but she hasn't been able to find anything. So she's been talking to people across the board to try to get them to listen to her.
Yeah, I hear I hear Benna is up and awake with us. What does Benna think? Does she have her little Trump flag?
I think that her position is that as long as there's some defense against abortion, it's a good thing for her people.
Okay. All right. We'll come back to you in just in a moment here, Mahgdalen. Mike Church here with you on the Crusade Radio Network here in our live coverage of the 2024 Trump-Harris debate here, live at crusadechannel.com, live on our apps, live on the YouTube, live on the X.com, and live on Rumble here. And I expect we'll be joined by our other colleague, Mike Parrott, any moment now. And, of course, we will have the entirety of the debate, which we will bring to you live on TV and on radio. Something else, I wanted to talk about this with our panel as we go into this tonight. The Democrat Party is now pretty much all out in the open on just how much they hate us. As if you already kind of knew that they did. But if you had any lingering suspicion, maybe it's just all politics. Maybe they don't really hate us. No, they hate us. Here is Nancy Weinbach's Nancy Nazi Pelosi today. This is in the last couple of days. This is at an event that is put on by this left-wing communist outfit. This is the American Communist Party in Richard Barrett's Texas. It's called the Texas Tribune. This is an awful, awful, awful gaggle of people, terrible people, as Trump would say. These are bad people. These are terrible people. All the usual left-wing suspects have all been gathered, except for Harris and Waltz, at this Texas Tribune confab that they've been putting on. Here is Pelosi earlier today spilling the beans and finally leveling with us and telling us all, if you're not on her side, just how much she hates us. And that you and I, our very existence, is actually a threat to humanity.
So what, are you worried? Why is it so close? From your assessment as a political, this is a guy who's done a lot of things that you have characterized as thugs. The attack on the Capitol, there's just the video that came out where you're talking about he's got to pay a price. Mm-hmm. He's clearly not paying any price. He could win the presidency again. Well, why is that from your perspective?
Well, he hasn't. I think he's paid some price. I mean, he's twice impeached and soon will be twice defeated president of the United States. Mm-hmm. But we have to make that happen.
Dream on, Winch. Dream on.
I always say to the members, assumed is a word that says ass of you and me.
Yeah.
So assume nothing. You just go out there and fight the fight as if each race is the hardest race that you have ever been in. Mm-hmm. And there are people who will never be, shall we say, inclined to support Democrats because of they just have a different orientation toward women, people of color, LGBTQ. They just are not ever going to be there. So say that's about like 30% or something like that, and then of the Republicans. And then you have very, very rich people who do not really want to pay taxes or have any regulation of clean air, clean water, any of that.
Yeah, we don't want clean air and water.
Hey, can we get some stock tips there, Nancy?
Yeah.
Very, very rich people, but it's a lot of money that goes into a campaign. But
so
here's
you,
where
in other words.
I think we have to be as respectful and understanding as possible. There are people who are concerned. They have fear of globalization. They saw the factory down the road move overseas. They're fearful of innovation. Their father is a truck driver, and now they're going to have
autonomous truck.
Yeah.
Now we're closed-minded, scared people.
Globalization, and they include immigration in there, although immigration is not the big job taker. In some parts of the country, there are some jobs that are lost, but actually migration, it really fuels the economy, and especially the kinds of jobs that newcomers
No, it doesn't.
Whether it's on farming or whatever it happens to be, until they work their way up. And so understandably, these people have.
Can you stop the tape for just a second, please? This is the problem. This sick, twisted, demented witch. First of all, just because you're a farmer doesn't mean you're farming to work your way up. You see, Richard, this is what she thinks of people that grow things like food. You're not there to grow food because you love the earth and you love farming, and you love being outdoors, and you love feeding other people. No, it's a stepping stone to a Democrat. You see that? Most people won't catch that little moment right there. But to her and to these kind of people, you're just a little person. And you're just struck because your life sucks so bad because you had to pick asparagus today. And you know that somewhere you're going to climb that ladder and be a Democrat someday and steal from people. These people are simply detestable. These are the most vile, disgusting human beings in the history of vile, disgusting human beings. They have no empathy with you and I whatsoever. There was more that I could have let the tape play a little more, because she gets a little more insulting, if that's possible.
For themselves, but also for their children. And that's why what Joe Biden did is so good and has to be projected and put out there
so
is that
good?
These jobs that we did in all these bills, many of them do not require a college education. You can make, a lot of money in terms of the trades and all the rest if that's the path
Oh, stupid people, you mean?
because we have prevailing wage, Davis-Bacon in this legislation, and
Stop the damn
apprenticeships.
tape! You didn't have anything to do with prevailing wage and Davis-Bacon, and Davis-Bacon kills jobs. It is a proven fact. As a matter of fact, if you want to get a bridge built and you want to get it built on time, you actually have to suspend the Davis-Bacon Act. And you see what's going on here. We did this. You plebeian, pedestrian, hoi polloi jerks out there, if it weren't for us passing bills, all of you would die. You would all starve to death, you disgusting little people here. And Joe Biden, the greatest man in the history of great men, tried to help you. And God bless him and God rest. Well, not yet. Joe tried to help you, and you didn't want his help. But now Kamala's going to come and show Trump the pasture, and finally now we're going to get something done. You just said we passed all these acts and bills. Well, why aren't we all swimming in cash and glory and happiness? Why is anxiety at 63% among teenagers, Nancy? Why is obesity at 73% among people under the age of 24? How did that happen? And you could just let that tape play on and on and on and on. Nancy's drunk with with what she thinks is her success. But you got just a little snippet there of what they actually think about you. Now, Richard.
Yes.
Trump, if you put Trump on the exact same stage and gave him the same question, he would boast and brag about, we had the greatest economy ever. We did this and that and the other. But he would brag about removing chains, shackles, laws, impediments, hurdles, regulations, taxes, and things like that. He would brag about, I got people out of your way. You did it. I didn't do anything. I just removed some roadblocks. A complete and total dichotomy. You see that?
Yes. Of course, when you have somebody who has $13 a pint ice cream and a $24,000 fridge, it's going to be a lot more. She's only going to have to rely on the means which she acquired those things, which is through government. The woman has never built anything. She's been in there since before I was born, essentially. She's been in government in one way, shape, or form. So she's going to, by the way, real quick, the Texas Tribune is trash. It's always been trash. Always will be trash, an absolute disgrace to the state and the Republic of Texas.
Yep.
But the fact of the matter is, they have people like her, and she's going to sit up there and she's going to drift from one different point to another, talking about, oh, well, LGBTQ, and that's why, Nancy, as you said, Mike, if the Democratic Party was so victorious, why was she on Bill Maher saying, well, we need to document the 20 million illegals to become 20 million legals so they can vote for us. If you guys are doing so well and being so dominant, you would need 20 million more people. And so all of these things stack on top of each other when you come from the liberal enclave that is San Francisco. Yes, Trump is a builder. And Mike, you and I talked about this all the way back to 2016. Trump loves getting down and hanging out with your everyday workers. The stories upon stories upon stories. I'll say it again. I know you guys are probably sick of it. When I was at the Trump Hotel in 2020, we asked the barbacks and the wait staff at his hotel, which was delicious, by the way. If you're ever in Vegas, you should definitely stay at the Trump. But Trump's coming here in a couple weeks, and they were genuinely excited. There was no sighing. There was no hemming. They were like, yeah, Trump's coming. He's pretty cool. He's a pretty cool guy. And Trump used to give money out to people in tips. For a billionaire with a golden toilet versus a woman with a $24,000 fridge, you would think the guy with the golden toilet doesn't understand the working person, and he does. And that's why he builds things. That's why the famous picture of the regulations that he cut the first week in office, he brought in that huge stack of papers, all that regulation. He said, I cut this.
They're on pallets.
It's gone. Remember the executive order? For every one law you had to put on the books or whatever, he had that regulation. He said, I cut this. So,
and now he says he'll do 10 cuts for every one new regulation. Mahgdalen Rose, I see Mahgdalen is with us here on the StreamYard, and on the video. Good to see you out there. So you were listening to Nancy Pelosi and what she was saying with the Texas Tribune. This is nothing out of the ordinary for her, and this is pretty much par for the course. But it really is dismissive and arrogant. These people's arrogance is never. I've been doing this for 33 years, and I can still can be amazed and surprised at just how mean and arrogant they can be.
And it's really interesting because if you think back to 2016, I remember being in high school and one day looking at the poll numbers of all the battleground states at that time between Trump and Hillary. And you could see that people were greatly over-exaggerating the fact that this was going to go for Hillary. You could see that they were within a few points everywhere. So this arrogance and sort of the hatefulness towards conservatives and the idea that we're past the time of conservatism, it came to a head in 2016. I think a lot of people in media continuously talk about the shock of Donald Trump winning, but it wasn't shock. It was only shock on the part of the media because they had built up Hillary Clinton so much, and we're in the same position now. There is a buildup around Kamala Harris. There is an idea that she is unstoppable, that she is everyone's Mamala. I remember that from 2020 because she has no children. They turned her into Mamala for her stepkids. But the reality is she's in no way defeating Donald Trump in anything. She's neck and neck with him in the polls. She might have an edge in states that are trending very much blue like Arizona. But in general, in states like Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, people are not coming out for her. And she does not have the ground game and infrastructure that Donald Trump has. I've criticized the Trump campaign before for the lack of infrastructure. That's not the case this time around. So I think that the media is pushing this narrative that it'll be shocking if she loses. It won't even be shocking if she loses this debate, much less the election.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I would just add to the infrastructure issue. I talked to somebody that is working for the Trump campaign in Arizona today. And he told me, he goes, now, you can just, this is inside campaign chatter. Don't quote me. Don't use my name. But I'm telling you, we are confident we're going to win Arizona. Arizona is turning. We're confident we're going to win Arizona, which means that they're going to be able to overcome God knows how many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens and dead people that are still going to vote in Arizona. So there is a ground game there, and they have put some effort into it. I'll say also this about Hillary and Hillary's. You know, Hillary said that they all thought Hillary was inevitable. No, it's inevitable. We're going to have a female president. It's not inevitable. It isn't inevitable. And by the way, how's that worked out for most of Europe? Most of Europe, well, what about Margaret Thatcher? You know, you're talking about someone that came from from another generation at another time in another era. That is not this kind of caricature of what a leader is that Kamala Harris is. So at this juncture, we've got 10 minutes to go here now. The butterflies, I'm sure, are being kicked into high gear. We'll find out when Kamala and Trump come on the stage. I don't know. Do you walk across the stage if you're Trump and try and shake her hand? Do you just go straight to your podium and just kind of nod? Richard, I agree with you. The three words that would be devastating to the Harris campaign tonight and to the Democrat Party are Madam Vice President.
Indeed. If Trump really was the king that we think he is, he should take the smaller podium. He should get there first and take it. So she has to take a larger podium.
I decided I was going to be magnanimous, and I'm going to take the little one mine. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a little cold out because my podium shrunk because everything doesn't like me. It's fine.
Would it be hysterical Magdalene, if he actually went to the small podium first and went, oh, right, wrong podium. Sorry, it's yours.
I think so. And I think he has so much room to make her a laughing stock. I don't know if you saw the J.D. Vance post where he was saying, keep the cat memes coming. And now Trump is reposting himself sort of huddled around with ducks and cats on Truth Social. This man is ready to make people laugh. And she is certainly somebody who you can point to. And you mentioned this trend of leaders in Europe, the women leaders there. It's so odd because they're almost all childless. They almost all have spent their entire life in politics. If we had a woman who had, 4 children and she had raised these kids and she did all these things and accomplished them and she was running for office, it'd be fascinating. But why is that never the case? And I think that's something a lot of Republican and right-wing parties around the world want to know, because if we could put someone up like that post-Trump, and so could right-wing European parties, it would be a major win for conservatism across the board.
And I don't know if you caught any of this today, but Eric Swalwell lost his mind. Lost his mind in a committee hearing in Congress today. He had a complete and total third grader meltdown because, and I didn't even catch who the committee chairman was, but he showed a meme of Trump coddling a duck and a cat. And now, this is something, folks, let me just point something out to you. What's happening in Springfield, Ohio is real. It is as real as what happened to the people of Palestine, Ohio. Okay? The train did derail. The dioxin did spill out. When dioxin mixes with certain things in the environment, it gets out. If you get it in you, you never get rid of. You get any dioxin in you, you have it in you for the rest of your life. It really did happen. The Biden regime basically denied Palestine, Ohio ever happened. They denied it. It took Biden like a year and a half to get there. President Trump was there in 3 weeks handing out Big Macs. This is the same thing they are denying, abjectly denying, that what has happened in Springfield, Ohio is actually happening. No, it did happen. There are Haitians, and they do eat cats. Somebody should say, should make a meme about, hey, somebody tell Harris that one of her buddies, or somebody tell Pelosi that one of her buddies in Springfield, Ohio, is chasing Don Gatto around with a knife. Remember the song when we were kids? I caramba cried Don Gatto. That's I caramba cried the cat. Well, they are eating cats for real. For real, they're eating cats. There's body cam footage of a woman holding a cat, and she has been eating the cat. They are eating cats in Springfield, Ohio. Mike Parrott, you are here. I see there. Let us, before you light that thing up, let me, gosh, I'm so jealous because I can't do it in this room here. How do you see what's going? We got about 4 minutes to kick off here. How do you see what's going to happen tonight?
I was trying to listen to you guys while I was getting to the studio. I agree with a lot of what was said. I think the most the sentiment that I am expecting to prevail in the aftermath, the spin of this thing, is Kamala only needs to perform at like a C- level. And if she can perform at a C- level, they're going to count that as a win. They're going to say that she's a genius, maybe possibly a member of Mensa. I don't know. So there really are two standards here. It's always been a double standard. Trump knows this. I think that the muted microphone thing is going to actually bite against her because she's not very good at succinctly answering any questions. She hasn't done that for, 95 days or whatever, 120 days. So her having to answer questions, land the plane, stay within the time limits, that's going to be something that obviously I think she's going to be pretty rusty at, and it's going to show in the first couple answers. So I don't know. Those are my two main thoughts that I'm kind of looking for tonight, I think.
Okay, so here's the format if you're wondering. Question, 2-minute answer candidate A, 2-minute answer candidate B, and then 1 minute, if needed, 1 minute for cross-examination or for rebuttal or whatever the case may be. I don't know if you're seeing Kamala Harris talk. 2 minutes may as well be 30 hours. That is an eternity. Mike Parrott, you've done this live. Richard Barrett, you've done this live. You know when you're going like, oh, man, I don't know if I'm prepared for 30 minutes. I had it at 28, but I don't know if I can do 30. And you're looking at that clock going like, okay, I got to stall for 2 minutes. You got to stretch for 2 minutes. You know how hard that is. That is not easy. Yeah. And it's even more difficult to do it and not let anybody know that you're doing it. You're on television and doing it, and you're trying to go
That's
like...
why she needed the notes. That's why she was trying to scribble down things. And the biggest problem with that is she will go into, and I'm sure Mike and Mahgdalen will agree, she's been debate prepped into saying, all right, if you fall out, reiterate these three key points. And they're going to tell you, these are your 3 key points. Tell him that keep reiterating that he's a felon. Keep saying that we saved everybody under COVID, blah, blah, blah. The problem is that'll work once or twice. The 3rd time, the 4th time, the 5th time, now you're in little Marco territory where you just look like a robot. And once she says it the fourth or fifth time, Trump can easily say, Madam Vice President, you've said that 7 times. Is there anything else you'd like to say tonight? Or something to that effect. And once he calls her out to that effect, or once he makes that statement, she's toast, because the veil will be lifted. And once that happens, you may see a visible facial expression where she just cracks and she can't do anything. And the problem is there's only going to be 1 or 2 commercial breaks, and she can't exactly leave. So she may have a Rick Perry oops moment where she just says, well, I don't know, or something of that case. I don't think she'll be that blatant, but there will be a moment, I think, where she just looks like a deer in every single headlight on the face of the planet.
Yeah, with the headlights as bright as the sun. I also think that it's worthy of considering that, again, when you have to kill 2 minutes, you can prep for these kind of things all you want. At the end of the day, Mike Parrott, you know this, Richard Barrett, you know this, you've done live radio. Mahgdalen, you've done a little bit of live radio. You can prep all you want. If you can't put the sentences together, then you really don't have anything to fall back on. And at the end of the day, Mike Parrott, that's really what it comes down to. This is a debate. This is a format here. This is, it was agreed upon. You committed to it now. When that clock starts to run, you're going to get 2 minutes. Now, I will guarantee you, in his head, Trump's going to be counting his 2 minutes. He's been working on his time. He was very good with Biden. He got out in time, didn't step on Joe. He's going to be going, are you sure? You only took 1:10. You want to give me the other 50? Because I'll take it. I'm serious about this. If she can't ad-lib, it all comes down to an ad-lib. And you know what else, Mike Barrett? She's not a wonk. She's not a policy wonk. If she was a policy wonk, you might be able to get away with it. She's not a policy wonk. She's angry. She uses rhetoric. She uses ad hominem. She's not a wonk. So I don't see how this works out well. And I said the longer they go, the worse it will get for her. That's my take on it. Muted. Hey, Mike, I think you're muted.
It's hard enough to fill dead air if you're a high-functioning adult.
And when you're muted.
Right, and when you're muted. But it's even more difficult to fill dead air when you are semi-retarded. And so you're right that she's not going to be able to conceal that. This will be a very similar unveiling as I think potentially could be as it was with Biden. We all knew that Biden was in a dramatic mental decline that was withheld from the American people. Kamala was part of the people who withheld it from us. She insisted he was sharp as a tack. Now we're going to see how sharp she is or isn't, because this is the first time that she will be questioned in front of the American people, shockingly enough. And this is the only time. If she can stumble her way through this, she's going to win. She's in the clear. She's going to win. If she messes up big time tonight, that's the only hope that Trump has. That's how I see it.
Okay, so Richard Barrett, how do you see that?
Yes.
No, Richard, how do you see that? You agree?
So Trump has to stick to the points. Don't get knocked off with the felon. There's going to be 3 places that she's going to try and knock. 2 places: the felony convictions and the 2020 election. Maybe COVID too. She's going to try and knock him off. He needs to deflect those. He needs to slip those punches, and he needs to go back on the offensive, saying, "You keep talking about how you're going to fix everything day one. Fix it now." That literally needs to be his statement. Do it now. Whatever you're talking about, do it now. And if he stays on brand on that, and he doesn't, because Trump sometimes he can get a little undisciplined. If he can stay on task and stay within the lines, I think the muted mics help him, and I think Kamala is going to crack about 30 minutes in.
Mahgdalen Rose, quickly, it looks like they are getting ready to bring their... well, here we go, folks. We're going live now.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
See you. Have fun.
Thank you. Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid. And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year, because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all, in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us, and I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic, and the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse, mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have, and who's going to have higher prices, is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having, on the short end of the stick, in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. "Thank you, President Xi," exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21, that's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, "I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks." But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban, because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter, because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your desk?
Well, I won't have to, because, again, 2 things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea, and how unfair that would have been, part of the reason they lost, to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government, and we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade, and as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women, who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs, barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer the question? Would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
television.
television.
But the people
I'm
on
taking it from the
television
city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people were just killed, viciously and violently killed, and I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow, and I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse
President
me,
Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice
to
President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation
We do have a lot
that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, She was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute. I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America, they're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world, and crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle, they went into Seattle, they took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask you.
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes, sir.
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
no
Republican.
Judge looked at it.
And said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread
standing.
fraud.
That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The President of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters, because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran, and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror, and they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it. that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
The ABC News presidential debate will continue after this.
Okay,
the House will be in order.
This year, C-SPAN celebrates 45 years of covering Congress like no other. Since 1979.
Okay, folks, yeah, the scorecard so far is ABC News and ABC News' employees 63 and Trump 3. The fact-checking is a joke. The fact that the moderators didn't fact-check the Agenda 2025 is a joke. The fact that during the course of the debate, we were able to fact-check. There are at least 6. We believe there are 9, but we can confirm 6 states that allow day-of-birth abortions. So that's a fact-check. Why didn't that get done? There was nothing said about the threat to democracy when a bullet almost took President Trump's head off. Why wasn't that a threat to democracy? But why was January the 6th? The fact checks that are coming from ABC News, the idea here that the town manager somehow speaks for every person that lives in Springfield, Ohio. There are videos, and yes, you can say that there are dogs and animals that have been eaten. Folks, this is, in 33 years of covering, this is the worst. This is embarrassing for media. This is an all-out ambush. 100% ambush. Trump walked right into it. This is shoot out of the OK Corral. This is Custer's last freaking stand here. I don't know that it's going to sway anyone one way or the other, especially with Kamabla, as Mike Parrott calls her. Mike Parrott, how do you see this thus far?
I think it's a colossal disaster for Trump, and I'll be very brief. He should have seen the ambush coming. He hasn't dealt with it very well. He could have thrown it back in the face of the moderators multiple times, and he has refused to do so. And he has basically wasted a bunch of time defending his rallies and defending how strong he is when she calls him weak. She's under his skin. She's attacking his pride. She's camped out in his mind right now. And she's the first to call him a name that he had intended to call her, which muddies the water. So now when he calls her weak after she called him weak, it becomes a moot point. And so far, I don't say this with a smile on my face, patting myself on the back, but I have said from the beginning she's going to win the election tonight. I think that she's proving that she's headed in that direction.
Yeah, it's not looking good for Make America Great Again. As a matter of fact, it's not looking good for the free world. But then again, when you have 3,000 ABC employees against one guy, and he completely and totally, Richard Barrett, has swallowed the bait. I think Parrott's right. He's taken the bait. Although, I can't fault him, Mike Parrott, for defending himself against the lies. And I can't fault him, Richard, for going like, that's not true. That's not the way it happened. That's a lot to digest when you've got people that are actually basically correcting you in real time as you speak and saying things that aren't true on an international stage, Richard.
Okay, so Mike Parrott is correct on the thing. Trump was fine until she mentioned the rallies. Once she did, that got under his skin, got him off his base. He tried to get back on. My big thing was he started yelling, which didn't look good. But we have to take a minute to realize that ABC is getting cooked on social media. Right. The fact is, any one of us can sit back here and Monday Morning Quarterback and say, oh, Trump did this. I don't think any one of us, and I think, both Mikes are very experienced talking and dealing with questions and things like that. I'm not so bad myself. After 45, 50 minutes of it, guys, you're going to slip. And that was the intent. Like you said, Mitter Church, that was the intent. 3,000 against 1. I think it's very good. Trump did nail some points. He did get some good moments on her. And let me try to, let me just play the opposite. Trump has now been presented. If he has a decent advertising team, he can literally put her side by side on commercials and flood the swing states with the lies that she's put out on this debate.
They're incredible.
It may be a short-term victory for her in the debate right now, but long-term, if he has a smart social media team and he has a smart team that's like, beautiful, keep saying that, Kamala. And the Israel thing is huge because the Israel base splits the Democratic Party. Trump got her on record saying she supports Israel and that she will always be Israel's biggest ally. Remember, during the DNC convention, they had Palestinian flags burning, or they had Palestinians burning the American flags and going after. And that young aspect, that young part of the Democratic Party that they rely so heavily on, supports Palestine.
Right.
And now she's on record supporting Israel. So is it great? It's not the slam dunk we all wanted. I completely agree with you guys. But there are ways to take the enemy's, their short-term victory, and if you're good, you can shove it down their throats with the 56 days left.
Well, let's see if 1 against 3,000, round 2. Let's see if he can bounce back.
Look,
here on the Crusade
we're
Radio
in for
Network.
250 billion or more, because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here.
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also, as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and now, please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strong men instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President Trump, we have to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy, please.
She has a plan to defund the police, She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's
you,
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump-
no, the
President
former
Trump-
president has said
No, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I just
going
need
to
to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is
times.
now your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better.
Correct.
Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right, and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it,
Vice
pass as
President
prologue
Harris, thank
in terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to give. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said the climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as Vice President over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been Vice President. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
The ABC News.
Oh, it's historic, all right. This historic ambush of President Trump, 3,000 against one, maybe it's 30,000 against one. I don't think that round two went as bad for Trump as round one went, but there is still decidedly, this is every urban legend and every assault and attack on things that Trump has done or things that Trump has said has basically been brought up and hurled at him. And he's trying to defend himself, and I can't blame him for defending himself. I will say this, though. Why can't I see Kamala's right ear? I want to see her right earlobe. I want to see the whole thing. She keeps flipping her left hair, or her left. She'll flip her left hair. We've never seen the right ear. There's no way you're going to convince me that she extemporaneously, Mike Parrott, came up with the Central Park Five and was able to quote that and go like, whoa, let's go back to 1987 in the Central Park Five. And you called for their execution and you took an ad on the New York Times. That's not something that you talk about over breakfast over Wheaties or grape nuts. That's something that opposition research has looked for, and then has piped into your ear to remind you, Central Park 5, in 3, 2, 1, go. Is this thing a setup? Yeah, of course it's a setup. Did he do as badly in the second segment as in the first? I thought he got a couple of punches in. But he's fighting an uphill fight here, and he's got a bunch of people that are aligned against him here. I don't think, though, and I made some notes to Mike Parrott's statement that he thinks that this election is over now and Harris is going to win, but he doesn't say that he's not sanguine about that. He just thinks that the cards are being played out here. There's nothing of substance that she said. The substance is, this guy is old, I'm not. You don't want to go backwards, let's go forward. This is a nice little cliched bumper sticker. Vote for me and I will build you Section 8 housing, as if we already don't have government-run housing. Vote for me and I will give you student loans, as if we don't already have. There's nothing new here. This is Mario Cuomo, and Jesse Jackson and Walter Mondale and every other libtard pipe dream just brought forward here and put in a pantsuit and just dressed up here for today. I think, though, that Mike Parrott, I think you were correct about one thing, and Richard Barrett, I think you'll agree about this. This has been a complete, if you were a Trump hater, this is your greatest night. You're on your third bottle of baby oil, Lubin Tubin. This has been the greatest humiliation of Trump in the history of his life. It's not going to get any worse for Donald Trump after picking the pieces up and reading reviews tomorrow morning about this. So I think there's nowhere to go for Trump but up from here. Mike?
Let me pick up on that last point. Yeah, I think that's exactly how you would characterize these last 95 minutes for DJT. And in the aftermath of what's going to be written tonight and tomorrow morning and for the next week is going to be a humiliation, a ritualized humiliation of Trump. They're going to claim he lost. They're going to claim that he was an extremist. They're going to claim that he looked old, that he stumbled over his words, that he was worse than Biden, some might say. A lot of that's probably not true. It's hyperbolic, but it's going to land and it's going to stick. The only thing I'll say to your first point, because I want to leave time for Rick, is just that we are a nation of simpletons who think in terms of bumper stickers, and her bumper sticker platform is going to resonate with just a lot of people, and that's just where we are.
No, I don't disagree with that. Rick Barrett.
True all around. But I guess I'll take the optimistic point of view, which is fine because that's not in my nature, but I like it. 56 days is an eternity in politics. Yep. Let her have her moment now, because there is this Mike is almost the same kind of position Trump was in with the grab him by the blank moment. Yep. Everybody thought it was DOA on that, and he could never recover from it. There is so much time between now and then. Like I said before, Trump, if he has a good closing statement, he did a little bit better in that stretch. And there are so many things. The gun comment, she's going to get cooked on from everybody. Yep. All these other things.
Here we go. Final closing statements. Rick, we'll come back to you in just a second. Hang on.
Very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution.
Okay, we're going to wrap this up here on the Crusade Radio Network. Thanks for joining us and thanks for watching. We'll have our Mike Parrott and Rick Barrett come in for some closing statements. I guess after you have been beaten up the way that Trump was beaten up tonight, Rick Barrett, I guess that's the closing statement that you would make. He didn't turn and say that we're going to make America strong again, we're going to make America healthy again. There was an opportunity there. He didn't take advantage of it. Instead, he responded to what basically he gave her credence and made her opposition to him and her candidacy credible by choosing in the last 90 seconds to say, well, that why didn't she do this? Why didn't she do this? He made it all about her instead of about him and what he's going to do. I think that this was an absolute unmitigated disaster for the Trump campaign. I think it's the worst possible outcome that anyone could ever have imagined. I never would have imagined it. I think that regardless of the spin, that Harris won this in a technical knockout. But of course, she was aided and abetted by a bed and a web of lies I don't know what you do in this day and age when people just say things that aren't true, and you can say that, well, that's not true. And then you have people that are officials, like referees with yellow flags at an NFL game, the moderators, they go like, yeah, we did an instant replay on that. She's right. No, you're a liar. And yeah, you killed people. You did this and that and the other. It was Custer's. George Custer is finally going to be relieved, Mike Parrott, from American history. Custer's last stand. It's going to be Trump's last stand. So there's going to be pictures in history books now. Trump and Harris are going to replace General George Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn. But as Richard said, and I agree with this is as bad as it gets. Yeah, he is going to be savaged and beaten up. But you know what? That media was always going to do that anyway. He's going to be savaged and beaten up. He's old, and he lost the debate. He did this and that and the other. You still have to go out and campaign. You still have to win votes. The polls are neck and neck, and that means he's up by 10. I don't think that this changes the outcome. I still think that heels up Harris loses. I just don't know how that we arrive at that. And I'm going to pray this little rosary I have in my pocket every day for that outcome. And that's all that I really can do, because I don't have any control over the rest of it. I do feel for President Trump, though, because he was absolutely, completely, and totally sandbagged. America does love an underdog. And if you didn't see an underdog being beaten up by 3,000 against one, or at least 3 against 1 on the stage, you weren't paying attention. And there were so many opportunities for fact checks that they could have done that would have shut her down and put her on the defensive, and they didn't do it. Instead, all of the fact checks were on him. This was a complete and total embarrassment for broadcast journalism. You know, I think back, Mike Parrott, you're almost as old as I am. Well, give or take 18 or 20 years. Same for you, Richard. I can remember back when the stellar moment for ABC News, and this is literally the stellar moment, in 1992, Bill Clinton versus George W. Bush. They had one stellar moment where we all watched and were like, I can't believe. And it was a woman that worked for ABC News whose name was Carol Thimpton. She was the education, she was one of the reporters for ABC News, and there was a question about education in the Department of Education, and George W. Bush had proclaimed himself as the education president, and she went, and it was a bad question about how kids were failing in school, and she went, well, why don't we ask the education president that question? And we all went, what? That was a horror show in 1992. What you saw tonight was idiocracy debate on steroids. So, the most humiliating moment of Donald Trump's entire public life was tonight, Mike Parrott. How does he bounce back? How does he recover?
I don't know exactly. I kind of agree with you. I don't know what his path to victory looks like, per se. And I don't want to be black-pilled or orange-pilled or whatever color pill means that, you think that he's going to lose or whatever. I do think he's going to lose. But that's because he has to overcome the margin of the cheat. He has to overcome the $2 billion, media industrial complex.
Oh, he's the underdog right now. You're right.
As well as the deep state.
Well, let me ask you a question about. Let me just step on your comment quickly. Does this now make him the underdog again?
Well, he's better when he's the underdog because he positions himself as the outsider, and only Donald Trump can position himself as a New York billionaire as an outsider. Only Donald Trump, as a former president, can position himself as a political outsider, as the 45th president of the United States. But I agree with you as well, and I think Barrett makes a good point. A lot of the aftermath is already kind of baked in. Everybody knows that the media is going to be against him. Everybody knows that all she had to do was have a C- performance, and they're going to proclaim her as a Mensa member and victorious. Well, she didn't have a C- performance. She had an A+ performance. She did, and I think that's objectively true. I don't agree with practically anything that she said, but her performance was almost perfect.
Yes.
And as a result of that, they're going to be able to now, they have license to write anything they want about Trump. And they're already doing it. And they're going after his comment about eating the pets, which you and I know is objective reality. Haitians are eating the pets in Ohio right now, and it's absolutely bloody true. And yet the media are going to stand in front of the burning building and say these are mostly peaceful protests because that's what they do, and they will get away with it.
Yeah, Richard Barrett, the most, again, and I don't say this with sanguine eyes or out of any sort of joy whatsoever, but this is going to be in the Trump household. There are going to be vases thrown and stuff broken at Mar-a-Lago. This is the most embarrassing night probably in the history of Donald John Trump's life. He was completely and totally eviscerated by a pair of moderators who were prepared for every answer that he could possibly have given. He always had the tendency to ramble. He rambled in the debate against Biden, but he still won. But tonight, the ramble is going to be portrayed as old and senile. This was a media assassination hit job. It just shows you the power of broadcast media. He walked into Little Bighorn here, part 2. Custer's last stand was a park. It was a day in the park, a picnic. Let's not forget, by the way, that the groomers, Mike Parrott, at Disney, ABC Cap Disney, Disney owns ABC. Mm-hmm. Okay, the Grooming International owns ABC, so don't think that you're dealing with people that are upright, standing, and moral. But Rick Barrett, what is the path forward for President Trump? Because right now, he is probably going to take the biggest hit. Hillary never laid a glove on him like this.
True, but let's think in terms of the American people.
Okay.
They have the attention span, less of an attention span than a goldfish. This is true fact. They're very easily distracted by shiny objects. 9/11's tomorrow. So half of the op-eds that would have gone against Trump are going to get buried by 9/11 coverage. 2, the broadcast media can write everything they want. They're a dinosaur. We live in a TikTok, YouTube, Instagram age. We live in a meme instant reaction age. Trump landed the Instagram, Twitter, meme moments, the I'm speaking. She didn't get her viral moment. No matter what she did, no matter how, and she was polished. She rehearsed her answers well. Her cadence was fine. Like Mike Parrott said, I don't think it's A. I think it's a B+ performance because the RBF, some of you can look that up. The RBFs are going to get used against her over and over and over again. The smiles and these other kinds of things from a objective perspective aren't going to be great in the long term because it confirms to everybody this was a bias confirming debate. If you didn't like Trump, you're going to dance in the streets.
Yes.
If you don't like Harris, you're going to be like, look at that. Look at the way she reacts this whole time. She was desperate for him to just bite on one of those things because she was looking at him. She was gesturing at him. She was doing all of these things, and he treated her like a gnat at a barbecue. He didn't even react to any of it. So is this the worst moment? Yes, it is. But you know what? I'd rather get knocked down in round 2 and get back up with 7 rounds to go than they get knocked out in round 9. All right. And yes, I think we've all said that the October surprise is her being enshrined as number 47 anyway. They have that up their sleeve. But there's plenty of time in September. Gas prices are still bad. Food prices are still bad. You can't talk your way out of a bad economy. And you can't talk your way out of Venezuelan gangs. And you can't talk your way out of Springfield. And you can't do all these other things because we have alternative media going to these places and reporting on them. So, you know what? Take the bad night. Trump's been here before. Trump knows how to rebound from these things. I think we all fell for hubris, all of us, thinking that this was going to be a knockout. And let me end on this. We underestimated the legacy media. We underestimated.
Boy, howdy, did we?
And guess what? I'd rather do it now because now you won't for the next 56 days.
Moderators, #moderators is trending on X right now.
Oh, so, breaking news. David Muir just endorsed Kamala Harris for president.
No kidding.
No, you didn't. But I mean, you might as well. But.
Well, there are going to be all manner of memes and all manner of jokes that are going to be written in the next day, or with 3 against 1, and the pile on, and Trump at the bottom of the pile, and them just flogging him, going like, "Do you give? Do you give? Do you give?"
He loves the fighter mentality. So all you're doing is giving that back to him.
Well, all I could think tonight as I was watching the second segment was, where's Hulk Hogan at when I need him?
Yeah.
We could use a Hulk Hogan moment right when they tried to kill. I find this to be the most significant non-event of the evening, Mike Parrott. And I think that this will ultimately, you said, I'm going to quote you now, on July the 13th at about 7:30 p.m., you said on these airways, Donald John Trump was just reelected president of the United States. So now here we are 6 weeks later, and it's like, well, yeah, I predicted that Heels Up Harris is going to carry the day. At the end of the day, ABC chose to make the threat against democracy the canard that is January the 6th. They framed it as the worst attack since 1776. And they said nothing about, well, didn't someone try and assassinate one of the candidates on the stage? If you take someone out in a free and fair election in a democracy, if they're assassinating, that is by definition election interference. That is an assault on our democracy. The fact that the assassination attempt on Trump was not mentioned, and yet January the 6th was, to me, will ultimately be, well, how come they didn't ask Trump about being killed? You can't take the bullet in the head, the blood and all that. You can't ever walk that back. People saw it. They're going to remember where they were when they heard it. So I'm not ready to throw the election for Harris just yet. Does she have an A+? I agree with Richard. Probably a B. But then again, I don't think that someone like her that's so filled with error and hate is capable of an A+. Not if there has to be some modicum of honesty and some moral truth there. I don't think she's capable of an A+. But did she outperform what I thought she was going to do? Oh, yeah. I also want to know, and I bet you that there were people going to go frame by frame tonight. Do you remember in the second debate of Biden and Trump when people were discovering the fake ear, Mike? Remember Biden's fake ear?
Yeah, I remember that.
Now, did you think he had a fake ear and he had an earpiece in?
You know, I really didn't. I didn't go down that path too deeply, and I don't really have a strong opinion about it. But I will say that the fact that we have memory hold an assassination attempt that drew blood on a former president, and it didn't come up in the debate, except for one line when Donald Trump said, I took a bullet in the head. Except for that, it didn't come up at all. And I find that to be very very interesting. And by the way, on January 13th, when I said that, his opponent was Joseph Biden, who 8 days later was no longer his opponent. So they tried to kill him, they failed to kill him, so Biden left. All right, and they put in someone who could beat him. And I think that has really, and I hate to say it, but when she came out, I think on Parrott Talk he dropped out on like the 21st.
I think it was the 21st. It was 8 days later. It was 8 days later.
By the 24th or so, maybe the 25th of July, I started saying, we're underestimating her. We're underestimating the media. She's going to win. She's getting all this free media. They're going to remake her in the image of Obama. She's a tabula rasa. She's a blank slate. She really stands for nothing. She's a black woman. She's easy on the eye. I'm not saying that I find her to be, but she's easy on the eyes. She's kind of goofy. She likes to cook. She's gonna. And here's the thing, she'll never do this again. Now, she survived it, and
that's it. One and done
for her. That's it. She's not going to debate again. She won't take live questions again. She is done. Now, all she has to do is coast. It's up to him to now bring the fight to her, and she doesn't even have to engage.
This is true. Now, you're a military guy, so then in military parlance, you would now say she has what you guys call the initiative.
She has the initiative, and she doesn't have to get. You know what Marine Corps warfighting doctrine says: you engage the enemy with overwhelming force when you can win. Period.
And that's what they did.
She doesn't have to do that anymore. She does not have to engage him anymore. She can. She has the initiative to choose when and where to engage in the field of battle. She did it tonight, and now she's done.
So that is.
So we're not going to see her for 56 days.
Yeah, I agree with that. So can you give me that quote again? Use overwhelming force where
and when you choose. You know, you got to choose the.
They chose to use overwhelming force tonight. This was their one shot. They took it.
Absolutely.
Right.
And by the way, the 3-on-1 thing is it's Marine Corps warfighting doctrine. We like to fight when we have a 3-to-1 odds of winning. We like to fight when we're 3-on-1. And that's what they did. That's exactly what they did to Trump tonight. We all saw it coming from a mile away. It happened. Trump was inadequately prepared for it. He famously doesn't prepare for these debates. His closing argument to the American people, when he had the most number of people watching him possible, was, she could have done it and she didn't do it. And what's wrong with her? It is the biggest miss of his life.
No, I completely agree with that. Mahgdalen Rose is on our Dude Maker hotline here. Mike, I completely agree with that. And I opened my remarks up with, this was a missed opportunity. You made her a formidable opponent. He consecrated her as an opponent by using his final 90 seconds to go after her. Instead of going like, we will make America strong, instead of doing his closing argument, he gave the closing argument they baited him into.
Can I get in on that real quick?
Yeah, Rick, go ahead.
Bring Mahgdalen on. Guys, the last thing people want to think about is all the other fluffy stuff, this, that, and the other thing. That's what I said at the beginning. It's her job. Why hasn't she fixed it yet? If that's the last thing you want to leave people off with, it's her job. She should go down right now and fix it. Instead of attacking me, instead of doing all these other things, she should go down and she should do it right now. I don't think it's entirely a bad thing to put the onus back on her when the entire night she's been saying, well, I'll do this and we'll move forward and fluff. Okay, go do it. And I think, it's not perfect. And I think you guys are right in that, but I don't think it's a totally off the mark way to attack at the end. Because the last thing people are going to be like when she talks on her next debate or when she's on her next rally, I'll do this. Well, Trump, yeah, she is vice president. Why doesn't she do it right now?
Here's J.D. Vance quickly is talking to the press. Hold on.
Well, look, I think what President Trump has said very specifically is, one, you need to give Israelis the precision-guided weapons so that you don't have a lot of unnecessary civilian casualties. Kamala Harris says that she wants to cut down civilian casualties, but her foreign policy has actually led to a lot of Palestinian civilians being killed. It's also prolonged the war. It's also strengthened Hamas. It's like a lose-lose-lose foreign policy, but again, that's the incompetence of Kamala Harris.
What do you think we should Americans?
The voice of J.D. Vance, if you're listening at home.
They're vibrant.
Well, I don't think that no one has spread false claims. What they've said is that a small migrant community, 20,000, so it's big for the city of Springfield, but it's small compared to all Haitians in the United States of America, that small migrant community has caused a lot of problems. It's led to higher rates of communicable diseases. That's a verifiable
I don't know if you guys are catching this, but JD was asked a question, Mike Perry. This is how insignificant. I mean, I think the question is, what's happening in Springfield, Ohio? Instead, he was asked a question, could you verify the claims that the migrant community is eating animals in Springfield, Ohio? And JD just turned the question on and said, no, the issue is here. A small community in Ohio, Springfield, has been overrun. There are 60,000 people that previously lived in Springfield, Ohio. Now there's 80,000, and 20,000 of them are Haitians who don't speak English and are eating cats and dogs. So, again, Trump was baited. He took the bait. He gave the answer. Let's talk to Mahgdalen Rose here quickly. Mahgdalen, what are the young what are young conservatives and liberals saying about tonight's debate performances?
That at times Trump looked crazy. And I'll explain that. when you look at something like the fact that we have this issue with migrants in certain communities and Haitian migrants in certain communities, and you see it online, it makes sense. It's interesting. It's edgy. When Trump posts a photo of himself surrounded by cats and ducks on Truth Social, he looks like he's on the cutting edge. When he says, well, I saw it on TV, he looks like a crazy old man saying random things at the sky. And this is the issue throughout this debate, is that Trump's debate prep team are people who are chronically online. And that's fine if you work in social media. You should be chronically online. It requires that, but not if you're in debate prep. So I think Trump, like Rick said, was completely unprepared in certain areas. And the other issue we have here is I don't understand why when they were talking about Trump being a felon and all these things, and he rightly said that he had been under attack by her Justice Department, why he didn't turn to her and said, talk about endangering national security. You've been hiding the decline of the leader of the free world and who's really running this country and who's been making decisions in the Situation Room and who's in charge of the nuclear codes. Trump left so much on the table and got into the weeds on nonsense. Why he didn't talk about that, why he didn't talk about the fact that she has failed as a border czar. Just because he said border a lot doesn't mean he discussed it. Why didn't he talk about the Angel families? When she said the thing about him talking about crazy things at the rally that nobody cares about, why didn't he say, well, they care about it when I bring up the parents of children who've been slain by illegal migrants and immigrants? Why didn't he say that? I don't understand what happened here, but I'm not surprised because of his current team.
So you're saying that the debate prep team is responsible for this disaster?
Absolutely. Unmitigated disaster. And it's not even Trump's fault. I don't blame candidates necessarily when a debate performance is bad like this, because Trump wanted to win. I think he put in the time and effort. I blame the team. The team is supposed to know better. So Kamala Harris, as you and I have spoken about, has an amazing social media team and communications team stemming out of the DNC and her own private campaign staff. Trump does not have that. Just because his ground game has improved does not mean his digital strategy game has improved. And we've talked about some of the people Kamala Harris has on her team and the DNC has running communications and digital strategy. I cannot list back to you the same way I can list the geniuses behind the Democrat side. I cannot give you the Republican list because it does not exist. And I think what we're seeing now is chronically online people serving as debate coaches. And for some reason, Tulsi Gabbard is the person dictating what he does in debate. Tulsi Gabbard is not a foreign policy genius. She just cosplays one.
Well, whoever was head of the debate coach team is going to get fired tonight. Mike Barrett, Trump said, they don't fire anyone. I will fire. Well, whoever was in charge of coaching him for the debate lost their job and are never going to be part of Trump International again. And I agree with Mahgdalen on that. And there were a lot of answers. But let's say another thing. And Kamala Harris had the perfect, absolutely well-researched and vetted answer to every single statement he made. That's not possible. Mike Parrott, that's not possible. There's no way they drilled into her head enough responses that she goes searching hard drive. What did he say? Yes, Afghanistan, I was there. No, Zelensky did not talk to me. Well, what he didn't tell you was... There's no way that she was coached into all of those answers. There was an electronic device somewhere. It was on her body, whether it was in her ear or whether they implanted it directly into the cochlear like Rush Limbaugh's. She was being fed answers. She was being fed answers and intel. There's just no way around that. And the fact that the ABC anchors intervened at the appropriate times to go like, well, we actually had fact-checked it. We know the ABC anchors had people in their ears because they're going like, fact check, fact check, fact check. Again, this was Little Bighorn. This was an ambush. This is totally one-sided here. And I guess you should have expected that. We stupid Americans expect other people, that, especially we Christians, that things are going to be fair and people are going to fight fair. They don't fight fair. That's not who these people are. They're not fair-fighting people. They don't tell the truth. They're not in an eternal search for finding the truth and defending it. We know this. So we shouldn't be surprised by any of this. But again, Mike Parrott, would you fire Trump's debate team?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think Mahgdalen makes a good point. He definitely was he was apparently debating to win over the Twitter crowd, and he probably will do that. He probably has won Twitter tonight, but Twitter is not reality; it's a surreality. And with respect to Harris seeming to have all the facts at her fingertips, it's plausible that she had an earpiece in. It's also plausible, and there's precedent for this. They did it with Hillary, where they would just give her the questions in advance. And if you have the questions in advance in a lineup, it's pretty easy to memorize all the relevant responses to it. But let's also remember the fact that I'm not saying that she's bright or that she's incredibly intelligent, but she is an attorney. She was a U.S. attorney. She was a prosecutor. She was a senator. You know, she's not some dimwit off the street. She probably is capable of at least tucking away, hey, you know, the Central Park Five, and let me use this when it comes up or whatever. So I think there's probably a combination of things that are at play here, where she's being sort of they're leading the witness and giving her softballs. They probably gave her the questions in advance. She's getting information fed into her ear. And just a note on the ownership of Disney, because Disney does own ABC, as you pointed out, and almost 25% of Disney is owned by Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, and Morgan Stanley.
There you go.
Those four financial institutions control a huge part of the publicly traded float, let's say, of Disney stock. And if you control 25% of the stock, you're on the board and you make decisions. So we have to understand who Trump is really running against here. And it's not just the moderators. He's running against the entire corrupt financial institution of the United States of America, which is Larry Fink at BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street here in Kansas City and Morgan Stanley on Wall Street. So the deck is incredibly stacked against him. And I understand that it sounds doomerish for us to pile on him and say, oh, he did so bad and all these things. He's fighting Satan, literal Satan. I'm not sure I could have done better than Trump under those circumstances.
True.
But Mahgdalen is absolutely right. She didn't get a single vote, and now she's the nominee. You want to talk about democracy? Why didn't you tell us that your boss is a husk of a man, a human vegetable? You know, like why didn't he drive these points home? And in the final analysis, yeah, sure, it's fine for him to make the point. I think the everyman point is well made. Hey, if you wanted to do all these things, you could have done it as VP. The everyman point is well made. But what he should have done to tie a boat on it is say, you said you wanted to do all these things. You could have done it and you didn't. I did those things when I had the chance, and I'll do it again. And all he had to say was that, and he didn't say it.
He kind of said something there was somewhere in that ballpark. But I want to ask you a follow-up question, because you worked in finance. She mentioned economists, and she mentioned Goldman Sachs. The last 6 Treasury secretaries, count them, 6 now, 6 in a row, have all been former CEOs of
Goldman Sachs.
Goldman Sachs. Why do I care about Goldman, Jewish, Sachs, Jewish, usury? Why do I care? You know, when you start spouting off all the economists at Goldman Sachs, I know all the Alex Jones crowd there goes, that's it, I'm out. You knew exactly who she was talking about. And I'm going like, first of all, you didn't have a plan. I thought that he laid the first punch early in the night when he said, she doesn't have a plan. It's 4 bullet point sentences. You might as well have run, spot, run. That's her plan, run, spot, run. I thought that was, that if he would have stuck with that, he laid another joke on her earlier. His funnier moments, I thought were her bet. Look, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is now speaking. Or answering questions, rather.
didn't have the power to control the border.
Oh, yes, of course they did. They could. They immediately, listen, I've been down to the border to Yuma, and all up and down the border, sorry. There are 27 gaps in the wall. The material for completing the Trump wall is sitting on the ground. The Biden administration, the day that they came in, ordered construction on the wall to stop and left those holes, and that's where the immigrants are coming through. They reduced, they dismantled the fences. They took down the long-range cameras. They took down the censoring equipment. They changed the laws. They changed our policy from a catch and return policy to a catch and release policy. They changed the Migrant Protection Act.
All right, it's kind of hard to hear what he's saying. Richard Barrett, come back in for a second, Richard. Are we at, and Mike Parrott, you're a screenwriter, you're a producer of movies, you're a movie guy. Richard, are we at, has Han Solo been put into the carbonite? And is the Revenge of the the Return of the Jedi, or whatever the third installment in the Star Wars original trilogy, is that what's coming next?
Let me at least address this with respect to Mahgdalen and to Mike, to both of you guys. This is nothing. I'm not saying anything bad, but literally an act of God would not have saved Donald Trump from the 3-on-1 attack that took place. Everybody, we forget as Republicans how before Trump, our candidates would shrivel into a ball 5 seconds into the debate and apologize the entire time and say, "Oh, you're right. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, this and that and the other thing." Trump got to where he is because he's a fighter. All right. And he fought for 90 minutes. And that's what the American people wanted to see. The people who support Trump wanted to see that. Your independents don't like, as you guys were saying, unfair fights. This was absolutely an unfair fight. Despite the fact that shoulder pads, I don't even know what her name is, was absolutely 100% in the tank. The fact is, folks, CNN looks better tonight because of ABC. And that's probably the biggest winners of the debate is CNN, because people actually think that's a decent network now. Trump did step in it, but if you're fighting on the defense for 60, 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes, you're going to slip up.
Sure.
And that was the point. That was the absolute point. So we got to give Trump at least a little bit on that, because it was just complete overwhelming odds. Mike Parrott's correct. They went after him with overwhelming force. You'll never see her in a debate again. Probably not the best idea, because 56 days is an eternity in politics. Trying to get to the question that Mike Church asked. Yes, there is a problem of peaking too soon. And like I said, when Kamala was first introduced, you're just going to have to absorb the run, and then it will peter out. Same thing here. There'll be a bit of a spike, sure. But in the end, it has to come back down to the kitchen table issues. And neither one of them talked about it.
Right.
Neither one. She tried to say these things about her plan and forward and all this other kind of stuff. But she attacked Trump for however many minutes. She focused herself on Trump. And that might be the problem in the end, because there's nothing you can go back to as far as policies. All she did was name Trump. And Trump, yes, Trump did. I was saying in the Crusader Stadium, he has to stop yelling, because he was yelling a little too much. And I think that came off as bad. When he was calm and making his responses, he was fine. But when he was getting visibly frustrated, which he is a person, and I understand that he would get frustrated. If everybody knows my history, I get triggered by like 2 people in a comment section. Imagine if I had to debate like three people at once. So I'm trying to say that, yes, it was not a great performance. However, there are memes and things that can come out of it for Trump. And I know people don't think that's he rode the meme magic in 2016. This may give him an opportunity to do that again. And secondly, if he has a halfway decent team to strategize and put together just side by sides of all the lies that she was allowed to get away with. Yes, the lies were great in the short term, but in the long term, it's just going to be, it could be fodder. Now, the Trump team could absolutely drop the ball on this and not use it. But if anybody is effective, or any of the super PACs aligned with Trump are smart enough to just line up all of these lies that take place, it could work out. There could be some good things that come from this. Is this a low point? Yes, but to answer your question, Mike, from The Dark Knight Rises, right? Harvey Dent, the night is darkest before the dawn. Now, of course, Harvey Dent became Two-Face, so I don't know if you really want to use that quote, but there is that.
So the question I ask is this Han Solo frozen in carbonite? And the next scene that we're going to have Luke Skywalker, who is now in full, complete, and total control of the Force. Is he going to go rescue him now in Jabba the Hutt's castle? By the way, guys, for all of you in our chat rooms that are going like, you can't hide earpieces. Come on, TKD, you're better than that. Blah, blah, blah. Can you see my earpieces? No, you can't. Now, maybe if I turned to the side and I gave you a shot of them, you could see them. These are the big ones. There are smaller sets that are in wire that I'm wearing. There are also the ones that Secret Service agents wear that are almost impossible. You can't really see them unless you see the antenna sticking out. So don't tell me you can't make a miracle ear. Look it up. You can make an earpiece small enough to where it's inside the earlobe right here and you can't see it. Don't be so naive. Come on, guys. And I agree with Mike Parrott. Coaching, memorizing, having the questions in advance, and then having the earpiece. Go to question, go to answer three, go to answer three. Yeah, you're completely and totally prepared. But Mike Parrott, let me ask you: Is this the Atlanta Falcons versus the New England Patriots? It's the third quarter. There's 10 minutes gone in the third quarter, and you're up 28-9 over the Super Bowl champions. Arthur Blank comes onto the field at the end of the third quarter to spike Tom Brady and Bill Belichick's head onto the field because the Falcons are going to win the Super Bowl. The lead is insurmountable. They've dusted Tom Brady. They're up 22 points. There's no way with just a little less than a quarter to go. And no NFL owner has ever gone onto the field of a Super Bowl game before the end of the fourth quarter. Is this the Democrats going to make this the Arthur Blank Atlanta Falcons 2012 Super Bowl?
I don't know if it's Arthur Blank, but I know that Lloyd Blankfein, the former CEO of Goldman Sachs, is super happy tonight, and his successor, David Solomon, this current CEO of Goldman Sachs, is super happy tonight because they were cited, these two men, as being the premier economists in the world who are predicting a Kamala victory, and that the Kamala economy will do better than a Trump economy. So, I mean, I know that I'm being cute and I'm not really answering your question. I think the heart of your question is, can Trump come from behind? I think we objectively have to look at the fact that Trump actually has to overperform at the ballot box because he has to overcome the margin of cheating. So he can't just win 51% of the states. You know, he's got to win like 60% of the states if he's going to be assured the White House. And can he do that in Pennsylvania and in Michigan and in Wisconsin and Arizona and probably Georgia? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. What it seems like tonight, is that the traditional view of American politics, which I know Trump is the exception to all traditional views of American politics, but the traditional view of American politics is that after Labor Day, people start paying attention. This may be the first thing that they pay attention to. What are their attentions going to be directed to? Well, it depends on where they consume their news and their media. The vast majority of people are subjected to left-wing media. Therefore, their attention is going to be focused to, this man is an old man. He's got all kinds of crazy ideas. He was ranting. He was growling. He was grimacing and glaring. He was spouting conspiracy theories. He lost his train of thought. He seemed mad and upset. And that's what they're going to know about Trump if they're just paying attention. Now, I've never met an undecided person. I hear that they exist. I guess there's 5 to 7 or 9% of Americans who are undecided in September. those people, those 5% matter. And those 5%, again, whom I've never met, it's like elusive. They're like the unicorns. Those people are going to be directed to the fact that Trump is deranged. You've got conspiracy theories. He says the Haitians are eating the dogs. They're probably not, according to the news. And that's it. That's the game.
Well, I never met an undecided either, and I've also never met a moderate. And if I meet a moderate, I go like, why don't you do yourself and your country a favor and pull the fence post out of your ass? Pick a side, jump on either side of the fence, and defend your position. That's what I suggest. You pick up a weapon and stand a post. At the end of all this, we shouldn't have expected anything other than what transpired tonight, folks, which was, although I do not, and then again, I've been covering these things for 33 years. This is my ninth time at presidential debates and a presidential election cycle. And each one gets worse and worse and worse. I think that the loser tonight is the media. I think the loser tonight are journalists. I think the loser tonight is ABC. I agree with Richard Barrett. The winner tonight is CNN. Imagine that CNN actually comes out as like, well, at least CNN did this and CNN did that. CNN is the largest force in cable news. Don't forget, they invented cable news. Ted Turner's genius in 1988 was, hey, we have this thing called cable television. Why don't we put news on it? It really was a stroke of genius that ultimately resulted in where we are today. Turner set some events in motion that, had he not done so, you may not have started the cable news wars and the races and all that. We have streaming wars and all that. We have competing medias. But yeah, I agree. Wait a minute. It looks like Trump is actually speaking.
It showed how weak they are, how pathetic they are, and what they're doing to destroy our country and the border with foreign trade, with everything. And I think it was the best debate I've ever personally that I've had. We're getting polls that show 92-6, 88 to 11. So we're having a lot of great polls that just came out. They're polls, I guess, phone polls.
Mike Parrott, he's saying he's getting polls saying he won.
A very important debate. Now, she wants to do another one because she got beaten tonight, but I don't know.
Why wouldn't you look at her? Why don't you look at her?
Mr. President. The polls are indicating that we got 90%, 60%, 72%, 71%, and 89%. So the polls are very good. Beyond the polls, I felt very good. I had a good time doing it. I hate to speak about our country so negatively, but that's what happened. They ruined our country. They've destroyed our country. So I hope you're all having a good time.
Well, there you go, Richard Barrett. Chime back in, Barrett. There you go. There's the Don coming out and going like, don't believe anything that you saw on that stage tonight. The people know I won. It was a big night for me. Big, terrible night for Kamala. I won. Isn't that so typical Trump, Richard?
That's what people love about him. He's got to be like an NFL cornerback. An NFL cornerback gets burned on a touchdown. You know what? The good ones, they forget it. They forget they got burned and they go back and they play the next play. Guys, they put out a statement. Kamala's team, Mike Parrott and you guys said she doesn't have to debate again. They made a slip up. I know people are burning me in the chat room for this. They put out a statement. They said Vice President Harris is ready for a second debate. Is Donald Trump? All right. If she's going to throw herself out there, I mean,
Mike Parrott, second debate?
She's making a mistake by saying, now is her hubris going to get her into trouble.
So she wants to spike Trump's head in the end. I dare you, white orange man bad. I kicked your ass. You want to go again? Let's go. Mike Parrott?
Yeah, I saw the tweet. A low-level member of her campaign said, quote, "That was fun. Let's do it again." And that's what the headline is based off of. The CNN headline, the Fox News headline, both based on that tweet from Brian Fallon saying, "That was fun. Let's do it again in October." I don't think that's a real thing. I think that they're posturing.
There's a statement from Jen O'Malley Dillon, the campaign chair. Yep. There's an actual statement. That's
okay. I haven't seen that.
No, it's in the chat room. Just
hey guys, can I jump in? Isn't social media awesome? Isn't the fact that we're all able to get this immediately and that we don't need the mainstream media or any media organ, that we are the media organ? Breaking news. Richard, you just broke news. Mike, you just were a party to breaking news. It's huge. So I just wanted to kind of observe that we don't need them. As I said when we started tonight, X.com is an equalizer. We now have a narrative space where people can go if you don't want the mainstream media narrative. I think it's the fact that President Trump is going like, no, we won, the polls say we won. I don't know how you would do that. You know what? I almost yearn for the days of, and I'm only saying this facetiously, Mike Parrott, you and Richard may be old enough to remember the guy that was the pollster for Fox News, Pumpkinhead, what was his name? McCarthy's buddy, Frank Luntz. Frank Luntz with the dial-o-meal. Yep. Where you sit there in a room in a control group, right? And you sit there with your little dial-o-meter, and as the candidate is answering the question, you turn to the right if you like it, turn to the left if you don't, right? And they use this in the Obama-McCain debates, and Obama dusted McCain. The dial-o-meal showed that Obama gave the right answers and McCain gave the worst answers. So I don't know. Maybe people were sitting out there with the Frank Luntz dial-o-meal going like, I actually kind of like Trump's answer. I can't imagine this. But it doesn't appear as though this is over. Mike Parrott, if you were the Harris team, you kind of claimed tonight, would you do another one? You've seen this tweet now. This almost seems like this is just pride screaming like, yeah, you know what? We're backed by Lucifer, bitch. What are you going to do about it?
Well, I mean, the whole affair over how many debates we're going to do and when they're going to be scheduled and who's going to host them has been an ongoing, sort of staged event by both sides, I think. So it's very hard to take them even at face value. I do see that, it appears that they are publicly calling for another debate, but whether or not, just because they publicly call for one, it's really difficult to discern whether or not they actually want to do another one. To answer your question, if I were her, I wouldn't do it.
Well, Frank Luntz himself says, quote, after this debate, the Harris campaign will have little reason to do another one. Again, the Barrett brief putting up in our chat room at crusadechannel.com/chat. Who won the debate? Richard, who is this source? 53% Trump, 47% Kamala.
These look like just local news stations. It looks like one is Channel News 8, which could be one of 100,000. They don't really tell me which one. And then the second one is W something. My think I can't actually see it. It's another small. It's another local news outlet. So there are people out there. There are polls that are saying, whether they're instant polls or not, whatever the case may be, that say Trump won. And all you need is one. All you need is one poll for Trump to go out there and say, I did it. And that can push them, and that can push them where they need to go, which is probably why the internal polling are, hey, we thought we did a great job. It's not the slam dunk we think it is. We got to go out there. Even Mike Parrott, I think he's 100% right. They would be dumb times infinity to step back out on a debate stage again.
Don't do it.
But they have to at least pretend like, oh, yeah, we totally. It's like Northwestern Illinois University beat Notre Dame. They're like, yeah, we'll totally play them again as they're getting on the bus and driving out of town. So the fact of the matter is, we'll play you guys next time as they leave. So maybe the internal polling isn't the slam dunk they think it is, because the people who love Trump, they're never going to move off of it. The people who love Harris are never going to move off of it. Even on Twitter or even on X, Miss Maggie O'Connell just put it out. Who won the debate? Out of 64,000 votes, Trump, 57%.
Well, let me say that I think that some of this is going to go. Mike Parrott's going to revolve around the questions. The question, for example, about the January the 6th. The question, there was a question that was about Kamala's race. I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, going like, that has absolutely no bearing. I mean, Trump didn't want to answer the question because I'm not going to answer the question. I don't think it matters. I mean, even Kamala. Kamala was taken aback by the way. I don't think that. Yeah, well, he really is. Let's talk about the Central Park Five. And again, I actually covered the Central Park Five. I actually know the story. I knew when she said that. I knew exactly what they were talking about. And yeah, those kids beat the snot out of and killed that poor old woman or man or whatever it was. And they did confess to it. And then they were told by Al Sharpton when they were purchased a lawyer by the ACLU. Renounce your previous statement. You didn't do it, and then now you're going to be innocent and all that. So let's go ahead and we'll wrap this up tonight. I think that tonight was a lot of things, Mike Parrott. I think tonight was an example of the power of broadcast media, as Frank Wright and I talked about today in my interview with Frank. And Frank says we don't have a civilization and a government under the auspices of that we had 150 years ago. Today we have an oligarchy that is run by and uses the media to control and to basically govern. If you don't have, and I asked Frank, I said, Frank, if they don't have the broadcast media, can they govern? And he said, no, they can't. Without today's modern media, they are completely and totally done. So I think we saw the power of that tonight. We'll find out what the effect of this is long term. I think that, again, I think that there were a lot of humiliations for President Trump tonight. Again, you could second guess, you can Monday morning quarterback all of these things. Maybe people are Monday morning quarterbacking Kamala as well, because I kept telling Ms. O'Connell, our producer, I kept saying, Maggie, is this look of hers, this sneering, condescending look of arrogance and supremacy that I am so... Is this a winning look on television? Because I don't think that it is. Hillary didn't even do that. Hillary just kind of stood there and went, pretty much what Trump did. Kamala let the emotions out. You piece of. So I don't know. I don't think it was a good night for Trump. I think Parrott's right, and I think that they unloaded on him, and that they scored lots of punches on him. They got under his skin. I agree with that. But then again, he's a fighter. You're going to get under the skin of a fighter, he's going to hit you back, and that's what he did. Did it work for him? I don't know. As we stand here tonight, can't say for sure. We'll pick up we'll continue covering this. Mike Barrett, final comments.
Final comment is, I think it remains to be seen. A lot can happen in the next 56 days. Not a good night for Trump. I don't believe Twitter polls. I think Trump overperforms on Twitter. But we will see. In the aftermath of all of this, hopefully it's already baked in. Hopefully he is an athlete about it. Hopefully he already knows that for the next 2 weeks they're going to pummel him, and he knows how to deal with that. I think he does. I think it will get more interesting. Prediction time, I guess. I don't see another debate coming. I still think she ends up the 47th president. Whether or not she legitimately wins the election or not, I think she still ends up the 47th.
Will you serve under a president who's not a natural-born citizen, is not qualified to be president? Will you? Because I won't. Will you? Will you serve? Will you obey?
I mean...
How many people are going to be like us, you're not even a citizen? No, not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, the hashtag not my president thing kind of comes around and goes around. They used it against Bush. They used it against Obama. They used it against Trump. I think in the end, the larger question, the existential question about the United States of America, these United States, is how many times more that we will do this and tolerate it before we finally just say enough is enough and it comes unraveled. It certainly seems like we're getting closer and closer each election. And this one is even more astounding, I think, especially with respect to the fact that she's never won a single vote for the presidency, not one. I mean, this was if you remember the plot from House of Cards, when Underwood becomes the president without ever getting voted as the president. We're headed towards President Underwood right now, and it's just so pharisaical and just so absurd, but it's happening.
It is happening, and maybe it's time to consider or to at least prepare for other options. Richard Barrett, what say you? Final comment.
I think way too many people like us, overanalyze debates. I mean, I actually think most people probably checked out after the first half hour because it was kind of a boring debate in that regard. And polls are going to be polls, Twitter poll or regular poll. They're all weighted, and you can believe them or not believe them. The fact of the matter is, if this is his low point, which we all agree it is, have it now. And we'll see what happens in the next couple of, and the next weeks coming up. And the fact is, most people are not very trustworthy of the media. Media didn't do themselves any favors tonight. Alternative media, CNN, they are the winners of this debate. And we'll see how quickly this is going to get swept under the rug. More people are excited tonight that Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris than anything else about this debate. The debate is already being swept aside because of Taylor Swift. So Trump should be extremely ecstatic about that because everybody's talking about her right now and not the debate performance. We live in a 24-hour news cycle. This debate will be off the headlines. What's it? Tuesday? It'll be off by Thursday. So we'll see how much this really impacts, especially if this is going to be the only one.
Okay, and with that, I thank our panelists, as always, Richard Barrett and Mike Parrott tonight, Mahgdalen and Rose for joining us. I would just say this, and I agree with Mike Parrott's comment. I agree with all that Richard said, but I'm going to focus in on something that Mike Parrott said. Are we just going to get tired of doing this and go like, I don't want to do this anymore? I really don't want to do this anymore. I think that we're at I really don't want to do this anymore. It's almost like it's out of just respect for tradition. That, well, no, we have to do it because our forefathers did it. Well, I don't think that we have to do it because our forefathers did it. And I think that we are at a 1990 moment, not an 1860 moment, a 1990 moment with what was happening in the Soviet Union. That is that the central government in the Soviet Union was becoming so oppressive, and all of its promises, Mike Parrott, had failed. Everything that the Soviets, everything that the communists had promised for 70 years or 50 years had been an absolute unmitigated lie and disaster. Entire families, generations of families, entire bloodlines have been snuffed out. Entire private property ownings across all of Russia had been eviscerated and had been taken by the state for no gain whatsoever. No one was prospering unless you were in the top 1%. And this was spread across the 13 republics, 15 actually, that finally decided. And you know what? The weeks leading up to the secessions in 1991 saw some of those republics flying Confederate flags from the United States, proclaiming their independence, saying we are finished with this system of government. I believe that's where many people are in the United States. Can someone like President Trump hold us together for another cycle or two? Yes, he did it in 2016. As my friend Chris Ferrara said, Mike, he pulled us back from the edge. It's over. Trump pulled us back from the edge. Go ahead and elect Kamala. I believe she pushes you over the edge and forces people to make decisions that they have been putting off and are painful and uncomfortable. And you know what? Sometimes as real men, we have to make decisions that are painful and uncomfortable, but we have to do them because history and our families and God is calling upon us to stand on the side of good, the true, and the beautiful. And maybe that is this moment here. So with that, I'm going to leave all of you and our listeners and our viewers tonight. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mahgdalen. Thank you, Maggie, for producing. We'll pick this up tomorrow morning right here on the Crusade Radio Network. And again, as we promised in January of this year, to be your station, your source for coverage of the 2024 campaign. We have not failed you, people. I ask you then, in your kindness and charity, don't fail us. Make a contribution if you can. CrusadeChannel.com/donate. Support our advertisers and our sponsors as well. Do business with them who do business with us. I will bid you adieu and see you tomorrow right here on the Crusade Radio Network. God bless you and Mary keep you.